On our 10th anniversary, my husband confessed he married me for a green card and was leaving me for his real partner, demanding half our assets. He packed his bags, but I had already sent proof to ICE. So I guess I'm writing this partly to get it all out, partly as a warning, and maybe partly because knowing it's out there helps keep me focused on the finish line. It's a long story. Buckle up. This whole situation is, well, it's the kind of mess you read about happening to other people until it happens to you. 10 years. An entire decade. We were supposed to celebrate our 10th wedding anniversary just a few weeks ago. I remember looking at the date on the calendar back then, before everything imploded, feeling not exactly excited, maybe just a quiet sense of accomplishment. Like, wow, 10 years in this crazy world. We made it. Now looking back, that feeling seems so naive, it makes my stomach churn. The man I thought I'd built a life with, let's call him HM34, wasn't just imperfect, he was a fraud. A meticulous, patient, decade-long fraud. Our story started like something out of a cheesy movie, or maybe that's just how he framed it. I was in a pretty rough place back then, about 22. Just got out of a messy breakup. My job was going nowhere, feeling generally lost and pretty down on myself. Classic vulnerable moment, right? And then there was H. He seemed to just appear, like this force of nature full of charm, attention, and this intense focus that felt incredibly flattering at the time. He listened. He made me laugh. He seemed genuinely interested in me, not just the surface stuff. He presented himself as this guy who'd had some tough breaks back in his home country, looking for stability, for a real connection, for someone to build a future with. He basically seemed like the antidote to everything I was feeling, confident, caring, and ready for commitment. Looking back, it was almost too perfect. He was the savior figure I thought I needed. We clicked fast. Whirlwind romance doesn't quite cover it. Within months, we were talking marriage. He brought it up first, talking about how he couldn't imagine his life without me, how he wanted us to be official, to build a proper foundation. He never hid that marriage would help him with his immigration status. Getting a green card, GC, was always part of the conversation, but he framed it brilliantly. It wasn't the reason, he insisted. It was just a fortunate consequence of us finding each other. It was about our future, our stability. He needed it so we could truly relax and build our life without the threat of him having to leave. And the green card process, God, looking back, the signs were screaming at me. He played the long game. He wasn't frantic or pushy in a way that felt overtly desperate, which probably would have spooked me. Instead, he was meticulous, patient. He treated it like a major project we were undertaking together. He'd research everything, coach me on potential interview questions, making sure our story was perfect. "We need to show them how genuine this is, honey," he'd say. It made me feel like we were a team, tackling this bureaucratic dragon together. But layered underneath that teamwork was the emotional manipulation. He knew I felt protective of him. He'd talk about the difficulties back home, the fear of having to return, sometimes even shedding a few tears about how much this chance in my country meant to him, how I meant everything to him. He made me feel like his security, his entire future, rested partly on my shoulders, on our marriage being approved. Any doubts I might have had were drowned out by this feeling of responsibility, this desire to protect the man I thought loved me. How could I question his motives when he seemed so vulnerable, so reliant on it? And over the years, the little red flags popped up, things that seemed explainable at the time but now paint a horrifying picture in hindsight. Finances were always a bit weird. He was cagey about his own money, especially anything related to his family back home. There were unexplained expenses sometimes. Large wire transfers he'd brush off as family emergencies, or helping out a cousin. He was, however, very interested in my income, my savings, our joint finances. But again, he framed it as responsible planning for our future. Then there was the emotional landscape. Our marriage wasn't consistently warm. There were periods of intense affection, where he couldn't keep his hands off me, showering me with attention. But then there were these sudden shifts into coolness, detachment. He'd be distant, quiet, spending hours supposedly working late online, or claiming he needed space because he was stressed about work or missing his culture. I'd try to talk about it, and he'd either shut down or turn it around, making me feel like I was being needy or demanding. I chalked it up to cultural differences, the pressure he was under, his past hardships, excuses, always excuses. And the biggest financial red flag I completely ignored, his resistance to truly merging our lives legally and financially beyond what was necessary for the GC. We had joint accounts for household bills, sure, but he kept separate accounts, resisted putting my name on certain assets he acquired, claiming it was simpler due to inheritance laws back home or some other BS, and always seemed hesitant about very long-term financial planning that didn't heavily feature his reliance on my stability or citizenship. It felt compartmentalized, like he was keeping his options open. Despite these things simmering under the surface, we built a life. Or rather, I thought we were building a life. We bought a house, mostly with my savings for the down payment, though his income contributed to mortgage payments. We built up savings, some investments. We traveled, though thinking back, his solo trips back home were more frequent than seemed normal. We had friends, routines. On the surface, we looked like any other married couple settling into their second decade together. I poured everything into that marriage. My money, my time, my emotional labor, my trust. He, it turns out, was just playing a role, waiting for the moment his investment paid off. The unraveling didn't happen overnight. It started subtly, maybe 6 or 7 months before the anniversary D-Day. A trusted friend, let's call her Sarah, who has known me forever and has a pretty good BS detector, pulled me aside after a dinner party at our place. She was hesitant, clearly uncomfortable. "Look," she said, "maybe it's nothing, but does H seem a bit off to you lately? The way he was talking about that cousin he helps out back home. Something just felt weird, and he was being really dismissive of your opinion on that political thing. It wasn't much, just a vibe she got. But because it was Sarah, it planted a seed of doubt I couldn't shake. That seed made me start paying closer attention. Not actively snooping yet, just observing. And I started noticing more inconsistencies. H being vague about weekend plans, his phone being glued to his hand more than usual, him quickly closing browser tabs when I walked into the room. The emotional distance became more pronounced. It wasn't just stress anymore. It felt deliberate. My gut feeling, initially sparked by Sarah, started screaming at me. Something was wrong, really wrong. So, I decided to actively look. The first real crack appeared by accident. H was usually meticulous about his privacy, but one evening he left his work laptop open while he went to grab something from the car. An email notification popped up on the screen. Normally I wouldn't look, but the sender's name, it wasn't a work contact. It was a woman's name I vaguely recognized. Someone he'd mentioned years ago as a childhood friend from his hometown. The subject line was just, the final steps. My heart started pounding. Against my better judgment, I clicked. The email chain wasn't long, but it was enough. Vague references to patience paying off soon, the finish line, and something about transferring funds once the main obstacle was cleared. It wasn't concrete proof of anything sinister, but it was enough to make me feel sick. This accidental find was the point of no return. That night, after he was asleep, my covert investigation began. I felt like a spy in my own home. It started with the digital deep dive. I checked our joint phone bills, hours of calls and texts to one specific international number, the same one associated with the email sender. I dug into our shared cloud accounts, finding saved photos he'd forgotten to delete. Him looking way too cozy with this supposed childhood friend, on trips he claimed were solo family visits. I created a burner social media profile and found her. Let's call her AP, affair partner. Her profile was private, but her friends list wasn't entirely locked down. I spent hours mapping connections, finding other people H knew back home. The financial trail was next. I hired a forensic accountant discreetly, told them I suspected my husband might have undisclosed assets or was mismanaging funds, keeping the marriage fraud suspicion to myself initially. It cost a fortune, but it was worth every penny. They were meticulous. They untangled a web of small, regular transfers from H's separate accounts, funded partially by our joint income, laundered through his personal account, to an overseas account held jointly by, surprise, surprise, H and AP. It wasn't just occasional help, it was consistent, significant amounts. He was building a nest egg with her using money I thought was going towards our life or his family's needs. The smoking guns came one after another, each one twisting the knife deeper. Financial ties. The forensic accountant didn't just find the secret joint account. They found evidence H and AP had co-invested in property back in his home country. Property he'd told me his family owned. He was literally building a life with her, using resources partly derived from our marriage. Recorded confession. This was pure, dumb luck mixed with calculation. H had been increasingly arrogant, maybe feeling close to his goal. He took a call in the car one day while I was supposedly asleep in the passenger seat on a long drive. He thought I was out cold. I wasn't. I recorded the entire conversation on my phone. It was him talking to AP bragging. He talked about how close they were, how he just needed to get past the 10-year mark for the permanent GC renewal to be smoother, how he'd handle the divorce quickly ensuring he got his fair share, meaning half of my assets, and how patient she'd been. He explicitly referred to me as the golden ticket he just needed to cash in. Hearing it in his own voice, that broke something inside me. Travel, photographic evidence, cross-referencing his claimed business trips or family visits with dates on photos found in cloud backups or gleaned from AP's less private friends' social media showed undeniable proof. He wasn't visiting his sick aunt. He was on romantic holidays with AP, photos of them kissing, holding hands, celebrating their anniversaries. It was a whole separate life running in parallel to ours. AP's online presence. Through more digging via connected friends, I found older, less private posts from AP, complaining to her friends about waiting for him to be free, celebrating his GC milestones with thinly veiled references, even posting pictures where you could see the background clearly matched places H claimed to be visiting alone. She wasn't just a passive recipient, she was an active participant in the fraud. The emotional shift wasn't gradual, it was seismic. The heartbreak was overwhelming at first. 10 years of my life, built on lies. The intimacy, the shared dreams, the trust, all of it fake. I felt nauseous, shaky, like the floor had vanished beneath me. I cried for days, hidden tears in the shower or when he was out. But then, something else started to burn through the grief. Rage. Cold, hard, calculating rage. It wasn't just that he'd cheated or lied. It was the sheer audacity, the decade-long manipulation, the fact that he saw me not as a person, but as a tool, an obstacle to be managed and discarded. The goal wasn't just to escape him anymore. It was to make sure he didn't profit from this. It was to dismantle the entire facade he'd so carefully constructed. The pro-revenge switch flipped, hard. He chose the week before our actual anniversary to drop the bomb. Maybe he thought getting it over with beforehand was somehow kinder? Or maybe he just couldn't wait to start his new life. He suggested we take a walk to talk in a nearby park. Neutral ground. Less chance of a scene. Easier for him to make a quick getaway afterward, I suppose. The conversation started clinically. He didn't ease into it. "Look, my name," he started, avoiding eye contact. "This is hard, but I need to be honest. This isn't working anymore. I'm not happy." Just like that. Cold, detached, like discussing a failed business deal. When I didn't immediately burst into tears or start yelling, thanks to the months of internal preparation and simmering rage, he seemed thrown off. He switched tactics, trying a bit of fake sympathy. "I never wanted to hurt you," he lied smoothly. "You're a good person, but we've grown apart. We want different things. It's better we end this now, cleanly." But the moment he saw I wasn't crumbling, the arrogance surfaced. Maybe he mistook my stunned silence, carefully practiced, for weakness. He took a breath and went all in. "And I need to tell you, I've met someone. Well, reconnected with someone. A P's name. She understands me, my culture. We're together now. I'm leaving." He said it with a hint of defiance, almost pride. And then came the kicker. "I'll be moving out immediately. We need to talk about the assets, of course. After 10 years, I'm entitled to half of everything. House equity, savings, investments. It's only fair. Half." He wanted half of the life I had largely built, the assets my family money had helped secure, the stability my citizenship had provided him. All so he could ride off into the sunset with the woman he'd been planning this with for years. The sheer entitlement was breathtaking. This was the moment. The moment from the title. He was laying out his demands, expecting tears, arguments, maybe begging. Instead, I just absorbed it. I think I managed to look shocked, maybe a little numb, like I couldn't process it. I kept my voice quiet, betraying none of the inferno raging inside me. I maintained a quiet dignity, didn't raise my voice, didn't plead, but under the guise of shock, I asked a few key questions, gathering last-minute intel. "Where will you go? Have you told a P? When were you planning this?" Just enough to make him think I was trying to understand while my mind was cataloging every word from my lawyer. He answered smugly, confirming he was moving straight in with AP, that she was waiting for him. That this was their plan all along. He must have thought he'd won. That the decade of deceit had paid off perfectly. He didn't see the ice in my eyes behind the fake tears I managed to squeeze out. He didn't register the calculation behind my quiet questions. He definitely didn't see the internal smile spreading through me, the grim, vindictive satisfaction of knowing the elaborate trap I'd set was about to be sprung, and he was walking right into it, whistling. We walked back to the house in silence. He immediately started packing, throwing clothes and belongings into suitcases with a palpable sense of relief, like a man shedding a heavy burden. He was chatty, almost cheerful, talking about needing to get his documents together, making plans for movers, completely oblivious. I just watched him, maybe offered a hollow, "Okay," when he asked if a particular box was mine. Every item he packed felt like another piece of evidence against him. The smile wasn't on my face, but it was roaring inside my chest. Let him pack. Let him run to her. His new life was going to be very different from the one he imagined. The second the front door closed behind him and his smug, oblivious face, it was like a switch flipped. The numbness vanished, replaced by adrenaline and icy purpose. First things first, secure the perimeter. I immediately called a 24-hour locksmith and had all the locks changed, double-checked the security system, logged into every single financial account, joint ones only I had access to, changed passwords, set up alerts, gathered all important documents, my passport, birth certificate, property deeds, financial statements, his GC documents I still had copies of, and put them in a safe place he couldn't possibly access. Then, the call. I had consulted a top-tier immigration and divorce lawyer weeks ago, after finding the most damning evidence. I'd paid the retainer, laid out the situation hypothetically. Now, it was real. I called her direct line. My voice was shaking, but not from sadness anymore. It was vibrating with fury and adrenaline. He just did it, I said, keeping it brief. He confessed everything, demanded half, and left for her. It's time. We execute the plan. Now. The meeting with my lawyer the next day was intense. We went over the evidence again. The emails, the financial trails, the photos, the recording. Her eyes widened slightly at the sheer volume and clarity of it all. She confirmed our strategy. Aggressive divorce proceedings aiming for maximum asset retention based on the clear financial and marriage fraud. Crucially, she reiterated the timing. We'd file the divorce papers soon, but the real power move was coordinating with the immigration submission. Let him get served with divorce papers, let him lawyer up thinking it's just about money, then have the immigration hammer fall. Maximum shock. Minimum chance for him to hide assets or flee effectively once he knew ICE was involved. Then came the task I'd been preparing for, compiling the dossier for USCIS/ICE. It was cathartic, in a dark way. Organizing printouts of emails, bank statements highlighted with the fraudulent transfers, sworn affidavits from the forensic accountant, transcripts of the recording, copies of photos, screenshots of AP's social media, a detailed timeline of his deceit cross-referenced with his GC application dates. It was a monument to his betrayal, meticulously documented. I uploaded everything possible through the official USCIS/ICE tip portal online. Then, for backup and proof of delivery, I sent a full bound physical copy via registered mail, signature required, directly to the fraud detection unit address my lawyer provided. Watching that tracking number update to delivered felt like lighting the fuse on a very long bomb. Now, we wait. It's been a few weeks since D-Day. Discovery Day, Divorce Day, Deportation Day, and waiting. The locks are changed, the lawyer is ready. I live in this strange limbo, surrounded by the ghost of my marriage but fueled by a cold fire. H has moved in with AP, completely unaware of the storm gathering directly over his head. He occasionally contacts my lawyer about starting the divorce mediation, still thinking this is a negotiation about assets. Just yesterday, my lawyer forwarded me an email H sent her. It was dripping with arrogance. Something about wanting to resolve this quickly and fairly so he could move on with his life, bragging subtly about how happy he was now, and pushing for dates to list the house. My lawyer sent back a polite, non-committal reply drafted by me. We are reviewing the financial disclosures and will be in touch regarding next steps in due course. He has no idea what next steps are really coming. He thinks he's free. He thinks he's won. He's clueless that the life he built on lies is about to be systematically dismantled by the very system he exploited. The waiting is agony. But every smug email, every day he lives in blissful ignorance, just makes the eventual payoff taste sweeter. Let him enjoy his little fantasy with AP. The clock is ticking. Hey everyone, wow. Didn't expect my last post to get so much attention. Reading your comments and DMs, honestly, it helped more than you know during this insane waiting period. Felt less alone in my cold fury, if that makes sense. A lot of you asked for updates, so here's the first major one. Things have escalated, but mostly according to plan. So, after H walked out with his suitcases and smug grin, thinking he was off to his happily ever after with AP, reality started biting him in ways he didn't expect, just not the main way yet. Remember how I said he thought he could just waltz off? Turns out, detangling a decade, even a fraudulent one, isn't that simple when one party, him, is an entitled idiot and the other, me, has a lawyer who eats people like him for breakfast. He didn't fully move out right away. There was always something he forgot. Some excuse to come back to the house. Before the locks were changed, obviously, then it became incessant texts, emails. He dragged his feet on signing off on things, probably hoping to annoy me into giving him what he wanted faster. This created this super tense period, where he still technically had some claim to being here, even though he was shacked up with AP. It was like living with a hostile ghost, who occasionally materialized to demand his share of the toaster. Every interaction was documented, every excuse noted. Then once my lawyer made it clear he had zero grounds to stay and should direct all communication through her, the harassment started. He clearly wasn't getting the quick, easy payout he expected. Suddenly, I was the bad guy. I was being unreasonable. He likely egged on by AP, who probably realized her sugar daddy wasn't delivering, started sending nasty emails, leaving voicemails, demanding access to funds that were now carefully monitored by my lawyer, demanding I agree to sell the house immediately on his terms, accusing me of deliberately dragging things out. It was pathetic. My lawyer fired off a very sharp cease and desist letter threatening harassment charges. That shut up the direct contact, but you could feel the entitled rage simmering. Serving him the divorce papers was chef's kiss. My lawyer is a shark, but also creative. H, predictably, started dodging the process server. He wouldn't answer his phone to unknown numbers, screened calls, apparently even told his work receptionist not to delivery. He was trying to thinking it gave him leverage. So, my lawyer got we found out through some digging. Okay, fine. Monitoring his now ex-favorite takeout place's online ordering platform where he still used our old when he usually ordered lunch. The process server waited across watched him walk out to pay, and served him right there on the side in front of his office building during lunch hour. Apparently several colleagues saw the look on his described by the server. Priceless, public, undeniable, served. His reaction exactly you'd expect. Within an hour my phone blew up with calls didn't recognize a voicemail. It was H screaming, ranting, accusing me in his life, his reputation. Buddy, you did that yourself. How dare I serve him like that? And then the threats started. He'd fight me for every penny. He'd make sure I got nothing. He'd drag this out for years, blah blah blah. Standard bully tactics. He lawyered up fast, hiring some bulldog type who immediately sent over ridiculously aggressive demands. H wanted 50% of everything plus spousal support. The audacity, claiming his standard of living was impacted. It was clear they thought this was just a standard messy divorce where the guy who got caught cheating tries to bully his way to a settlement. They had absolutely no clue what was really coming. Meanwhile, the other front was moving, albeit slowly. Bureaucracy, right? First, I got a formal letter from USCIS/ICE simply confirming they'd received my submission regarding potential marriage fraud and it was under review. No details, no timeline, just received. It was anticlimactic, but also terrifying. Was it enough? Would they act? Then, about a month later, an email. Not from the generic fraud unit, but from a specific field office. They requested clarification on a few points in my timeline, and copies of some additional financial statements H wouldn't have access to. My lawyer handled the reply immediately. This felt huge. It wasn't just sitting in a pile, someone was actively investigating. The biggest step came about 3 weeks ago. An official request for me to come in for an interview. My lawyer prepped me thoroughly, but I was still a wreck. Sitting in that government office recounting the whole sordid story, handing over originals of key evidence, answering detailed questions. It was draining, but also validating. The interviewing agent was professional, listened intently, and seemed genuinely appalled by the depth of the deception, especially the recording of H bragging to AP. I walked out of there feeling like I'd done everything I possibly could. The ball was well and truly in their court. So that's where things stood until very recently. Divorce proceedings moving at a crawl, H's lawyer posturing aggressively, completely unaware that H's very right to be in this country was hanging by a thread I'd carefully spun. The waiting continued, but now it felt different. More pregnant, like the air before a thunderstorm. Update 2, he thought it was just a divorce fight. Then ICE showed up at the airport. Okay everyone, deep breaths. This is the update I know a lot of you were waiting for. It happened. The hammer didn't just fall. It obliterated his world. And honestly, it was even more satisfyingly devastating than I imagined. So, after my interview with ICE, things went quiet again on that front for a bit. The divorce nonsense continued. Stupid legal letters back and forth, H's lawyer trying to bury us in paperwork, demands for depositions. H himself seemed annoyingly chipper in his communications via lawyers, probably thinking his aggressive tactics were working. He even had the gall to mention through his lawyer that he and AP were planning a much-needed vacation overseas soon, visiting her family apparently. He actually wanted me to sign off on something allowing him access to specific funds for the trip. My lawyer's response was a masterclass in polite refusal, citing the ongoing financial dispute. That mention of travel? Bingo. My lawyer immediately, discreetly, informed the ICE agent handling the case about H's potential international travel plan. This wasn't about malice. Okay, maybe a little. It was about ensuring he didn't potentially flee if he got wind of the investigation. Turns out, ICE already had him flagged, but knowing potential travel dates? That moved things up their priority list. The trigger wasn't just my dossier anymore, though that was the foundation. Remember AP? The childhood friend he left me for? ICE paid her a visit. Apparently, confronted with evidence from my submission, financial commingling, evidence of their long-term relationship predating his GC milestones, she folded like cheap lawn chair. According to my lawyer's contact, she admitted the whole thing was a long con, that she knew he married me for the GC, and she basically implicated him up to his eyeballs to save her own skin. Not sure what her status was, but she clearly felt threatened. Her testimony, corroborating my evidence, was the nail in his coffin. My lawyer, having given ICE the heads up about the travel, essentially helped coordinate the timing by ensuring ICE knew when he was most likely to be vulnerable and easily located. And then, about 2 weeks ago, it happened. H and AP rolled up to the international airport, designer luggage in tow, probably giddy about their romantic getaway and spending more of our marital assets. They check in, they go through security, they head towards the gate, and that's when CBP/ICE agents intercepted him, quietly, professionally, but very, very publicly in that busy terminal. I wasn't there, obviously, but I heard about it soon enough. H had apparently mentioned his travel plans to a mutual acquaintance, now firmly former mutual acquaintance. This person, who always felt H was slimy, messaged me later that day, hesitant but wanting me to know. Something crazy happened at the airport. Saw H getting pulled aside by serious-looking guys in suits, looked like immigration police. AP was freaking out. Haven't heard anything since. Confirmation came swiftly from my lawyer. H was detained pending deportation proceedings due to substantiated marriage fraud. His GC effectively canceled. His right to be in the country gone. The vacation definitely off. The immediate aftermath was illuminate. H, from whatever detention facility they put him in, apparently got his one phone call. He didn't call his lawyer first. He didn't call AP. No, his first instinct was apparently to have someone relay a message to a mutual contact, blaming me. How I had orchestrated this, how I was a vindictive liar trying to ruin him because I was jealous. The projection was astounding. Then came the call from his immigration lawyer, a new one, presumably hired in panic, to my divorce lawyer. Oh, that conversation was relayed to me with great satisfaction by my lawyer. H's guy confirmed H knew I was the source of the complaint. There were vague attempts to sound threatening. Making false reports is a serious offense. Then desperate pivots to negotiation. Maybe your client would reconsider her statement if Mr. H agrees to certain divorce term. But see, my lawyer shut that down instantly. My client provided truthful information supported by extensive evidence to the relevant authorities. Any attempt to intimidate or coerce her will be met with appropriate legal action. We consider this conversation over. Click. From what we gather now, H is completely consumed by the immigration nightmare. He's likely still detained, fighting a losing battle. The divorce? Suddenly very secondary to him. Though his divorce lawyer hasn't formally withdrawn yet, he poured all his energy into this decade-long scam, and now he's pouring everything into desperately trying and failing to undo the consequences. Watching this unfold, even from a distance, feels surreal. There's no triumphant fist-pumping, not really. Just this quiet, bone-deep certainty that the system, slow and imperfect as it is, actually worked. He built a house of cards on my life, and I just pulled out the bottom one. Seeing it all collapse under its own weight? That's the real revenge. So, what happened to H? Well, his legal battles were lengthy, expensive for him, draining whatever resources he had left, and ultimately, futile. The evidence against him was overwhelming. My testimony, the dossier, AP's confession. His immigration lawyers tried every trick in the book, appeals, delays, but the outcome was inevitable. He spent a significant amount of time in detention, which sounds suitably unpleasant. Ultimately, the deportation order stuck, but it gets better, or worse for him. Because the marriage fraud was so intricately linked with financial deception, hiding assets, transferring funds obtained during the marriage under false pretenses to AP, the joint property overseas. The feds took an interest beyond just immigration. While I wasn't directly involved in that part, my lawyer informed me H faced potential criminal charges related to wire fraud and conspiracy, stemming from the evidence uncovered during our investigation. I don't know the final outcome of those specific charges, whether he was indicted before or after deportation, but knowing he had that hanging over him, on top of being kicked out of the country he'd schemed for a decade to stay in, that felt like true, comprehensive justice. He can likely never legally return here, and probably faces flags in many other countries too. His golden ticket became a one-way pass to federal scrutiny. And AP? Once H was detained and it became clear the whole ship was sinking, she vanished, utterly, cut off all contact with H, scrubbed her online presence even further, and likely faced her own consequences or at least intense scrutiny due to her admitted complicity in the fraud. She definitely didn't wait around to see if her scammer boyfriend would make it out. She left him high and dry, exactly like he planned to leave me. Poetic? The divorce? Oh, that was beautiful in its simplicity. With H detained, unable to effectively participate, and the glaring proof of marriage fraud from the outset, my lawyer moved for an annulment based on fraud rather than just a divorce. Given the circumstances, H's non-participation from detention, the damning ICE findings, the judge granted it relatively quickly. This meant legally the marriage barely existed, particularly regarding asset division. Because the foundation was fraudulent, his claim to any marital assets evaporated. I didn't just get a favorable split, I essentially got everything that wasn't clearly and solely his before the sham marriage began, which wasn't much. The house, the savings I'd built, my retirement accounts, all secured. He got, well, deported, possibly with federal charges pending. It might have been finalized via a default judgment or a settlement he signed under extreme duress from detention just to close one legal battlefront. My lawyer handled the specifics, but the outcome was total victory for me. The social fallout was interesting. Most of our mutual friends were horrified when the truth came out. I shared a carefully edited version, focusing on the fraud. Many confessed they'd had weird feelings about H for years. A couple of people tried the, "But are you sure? Maybe it was a misunderstanding" route. They were cut off immediately. No room in my life for apologists or flying monkeys. Mostly, I felt validated. Reclaiming the narrative was incredibly healing. And how am I now? It's been a process. There's definitely sadness when I think of the wasted decade, the sheer violation of trust. It messes with your head, makes you doubt your judgment. But mostly, I feel relief. Profound, soul-deep relief and strength. I took a situation designed to destroy me and used the system he tried to exploit to ensure he faced the consequences. The meticulous planning, the cold anger that fueled me. It got results. Was the revenge worth it? Absolutely. It wasn't just about hurting him. It was about justice, about protecting myself, about ensuring he couldn't profit from destroying my life. It was about closing that chapter definitively. I'm doing well now, focusing on work, reconnecting with friends, enjoying my home, traveling a bit. Ironic, huh? Healing isn't linear, but I'm getting there. The future feels open again, and this time, I'm holding the map. Thank you all again for reading and for the support. Be careful out there. Trust your gut. And maybe, keep good records. That's all for this story. I'll be back with another one. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It motivates me to create more content like this.